The sinister secret of Briarwood Asylum. Deep in the heart of the forest, where the trees grew thick and the sunlight barely pierced the canopy, stood Briarwood Asylum. Abandoned for decades, it loomed over the surrounding landscape like a forgotten sentinel. The asylum had a reputation for being haunted, and locals told tales of the unspeakable horrors that had occurred within its walls. Despite these warnings, James Miller, a paranormal investigator, decided to explore the asylum, hoping to uncover the truth behind the legends. James arrived at Briarwood Asylum on a cold, misty evening. The building's Gothic architecture was both imposing and eerie, its windows shattered and its walls covered in creeping vines. As he approached the main entrance, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying faint echoes of laughter and screams. Undeterred, James pushed open the heavy doors, their rusty hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the asylum was a labyrinth of dark, decaying hallways and empty rooms. The air was thick with the smell of mold and mildew, and the floor was littered with debris. James set up his equipment in what appeared to be the old administration office, planning to spend the night investigating the paranormal activity that had been reported over the years. As night fell, the asylum seemed to come alive. The once silent halls were now filled with eerie creaks and groans, as if the building itself was breathing. James started his investigation, using his flashlight to navigate the dark corridors. He recorded everything with his camera, hoping to capture evidence of the supernatural. His first stop was the asylum's basement, where the most disturbing events were said to have taken place. As he descended the creaky stairs, the air grew colder, and a sense of dread settled over him. The basement was a series of narrow, dimly lit tunnels, their walls lined with old medical equipment and rusting pipes. James felt as if he was being watched, and the faint sound of footsteps echoed behind him. He reached what appeared to be an old operating room. The walls were stained with dark, unidentifiable marks, and a rusting gurney stood in the center of the room. As he examined the area, his flashlight flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind blew through the room, extinguishing the light. In the darkness, James heard a chilling whisper, "Leave this place." His heart pounding, James quickly relit his flashlight. He saw a ghostly figure in a white hospital gown standing in the corner of the room. The figure's eyes were hollow, and its face was twisted in a grotesque expression of pain. "Who are you?" James asked, his voice trembling. The figure did not respond, but instead reached out a ghostly hand. James felt an icy grip around his wrist, and the figure began to speak, its voice filled with anguish. "They took us, experimented on us, tortured us. You must leave." James wrenched his hand free and fled the basement, the ghost's voice echoing in his mind. Back in the main building, he tried to regain his composure. He reviewed the footage on his camera, but it showed only static and faint whispers, barely audible over the background noise. Determined to uncover more, he ventured deeper into the asylum. He found himself in the old patient ward, where rows of rusting beds lined the walls. The room was filled with an oppressive silence, broken only by the occasional creak of the floorboards. James felt a growing sense of unease as he walked between the beds, his flashlight casting long, eerie shadows. In the far corner of the room, he discovered a small locked door. Using a crowbar from his backpack, he pried it open, revealing a narrow staircase leading to the attic. The air grew colder as he ascended, and the faint sound of crying reached his ears. The attic was a large open space filled with old furniture and dusty trunks. In the center of the room, he saw a small figure huddled in the corner. It was a little girl, her eyes wide with fear, and her clothes tattered. "Help me," she whispered, her voice barely audible. James approached cautiously, sensing the girl's distress. "Who are you?" he asked gently. "My name is Emily," she replied, her voice trembling. "They locked me up here." They said I was crazy, but I wasn't. I just wanted to go home. James felt a wave of sympathy wash over him. Emily, what happened here? He asked. They hurt us, she said, tears streaming down her face. Dr. Harper, he did terrible things. We couldn't escape. He wouldn't let us. James had heard of Dr. Harper, the asylum's chief psychiatrist, who had been notorious for his cruel and inhumane experiments on the patients. It was said that he believed he could cure mental illness through extreme measures, but his methods had only resulted in suffering and death. Suddenly, the attic door slammed shut, and the temperature dropped sharply. James turned to see Dr. Harper's ghostly figure standing at the top of the stairs, his eyes filled with malice. You shouldn't be here, he snarled, his voice echoing through the attic. This is my domain. James felt a wave of terror wash over him, but he stood his ground. You can't hurt her anymore, he said, his voice firm. Your reign of terror is over. Dr. Harper's ghost let out a blood-curdling scream, and the attic was filled with a violent wind. Objects flew through the air, and James struggled to keep his footing. He reached out to Emily, who was cowering in the corner, and pulled her close. You need to leave, he whispered urgently. Emily nodded, and together they made their way to the attic door. As they descended the stairs, the wind intensified, and the asylum seemed to shake with fury. They reached the main floor, but the front door was blocked by an invisible force. Dr. Harper's ghost appeared again, his face contorted with rage. You'll never leave, he hissed, advancing towards them. James felt a surge of determination. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a small vial of holy water. In the name of all that is good, I banish you from this place, he shouted, throwing the water at the ghost. Doctor. Harper let out a final, agonized scream before disappearing into a cloud of mist. The wind died down, and the asylum fell silent once more. The front door swung open, and James and Emily stepped outside into the cool night air. Emily turned to James, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, she said softly. I'm free now. James watched as she faded into the mist, her spirit finally at peace. He looked back at Briarwood Asylum, its dark silhouette looming against the night sky. The building still held many secrets, but he had uncovered the darkest of them all. As he walked away, he knew he would never forget the sinister secret of Briarwood Asylum.